Welcome to Money News. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now is the founder and president of the Charles Nenner Research Center, Mr. Charles Nenner. He joins us now from Amsterdam. And Charles, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Well, David Levy, chairman of the Jerome Levy Forecasting Center, says the U.S. economy will eventually fall into a recession smothered by an excessive debt load. Do you agree with such a dire prediction?
Well, it depends which years he's talking about. What we have on our indicators, and as you know, as we do a lot of cycle work, is that the economy is not going to do much this year. It's going to pick up a little bit next year into the third quarter, and then it's going to be messy again, which is not such a surprise because there's such a thing as a Kitchen and Ugler cycle, an inventory cycle, and by that time the cycle is turning down. The problem is that we didn't have a lot of upside in the upcycle this time, so it's not going to be very good once the cycles turn down. So I agree with him. Just the timing is that I think, like I wrote to my customers, that this year the economy is going to be weaker than the first things, but next year it's going to be right. It's going to pick up for half a year, 3/4 of a year, and then we're going back into recession.
Now, U.S. stocks continue hitting record highs despite uncertain economic signs. Do you think the U.S. stock market is headed for a big fall?
Well, we had a target of 1720 on S&P. So once we were about 1700, we sold all the stocks. And I think we're having a forming of a top that can still take another month or 2 months. Maybe go back to 1700, 1720, because next week there's a new cycle that turns up, so probably then this correction is over. I still think we're forming an important high. There are a couple of reasons in my model. One is the margin debt is very high. The price earnings is too high for me. The put-call ratio, which means is how many people buying puts and buying calls, is too extreme. The sentiment is too extreme. And then, of course, I work with my price targets and cycles that tell me when it's going to happen what. And the market is very risky, so I don't think we go in anymore. We've been out now for the last 3-4 months, and we're just standing aside. The only thing that we have been doing is we're holding long TBTs. Now, TBT is an iShare that doubles up. That means if the yields go up, TBTs go up. And I wrote a year ago, if somebody thinks yields will never go up anymore, they shouldn't do that investment. But of course they go up. And I told people just to buy TBTs and wait for the next 10, 15, 20 years for rates to go much higher.
And Mr. Nenner, there's been a lot of fear and speculation about just when and by how much the Federal Reserve will start tapering its quantitative easing program. What effect is that going to have on the economy and the stock market?
According to what I sent out, is it has almost no influence. It's an assumption that it did something and it has some influence. I don't think it has any influence. And what's important is always the interpretation of the facts, not the facts by themselves. So everybody knows that already. But I'm sure they keep the money flowing. I'm sure they keep the short-term interest rates very low, and it's not going to make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm. And what about inflation? Do you view that as a realistic threat in the future?
No, it's interesting. My indicators still show a fear of deflation. Even China, there's almost no inflation. They're even almost going into deflation. I think deflation is a very serious problem we can still have to deal with, and that's much worse than inflation. So my fear is deflation, not inflation. Inflation will come. It will take another 3 years until it starts.
So taking all of this into consideration, where do you see gold headed? Will it rebound or will it fall even further?
Well, we went long gold, and I said this is every time it's a short-term trade because the thing is going to bounce around. And until we really have inflation coming, I don't see gold going back to the highs. I think it will go to 2,500. It's just making a bottom slowly, and we are bulls longer term on gold. But it will take time.
Mr. Nenner, what's your take on who should be the next Fed chairman, and how do you view Ben Bernanke's legacy?
I think he was excellent. I think he was really, I don't have any words for how excellent he is. People don't really know the history. Let me give you just one detail. A lot of people who said, well, what he did was very scary because of all the money loaning and getting into the system. And if you look at what happened in the 30s, that's the time when it also happened. And they had the same problem when Roosevelt and people wanted to flood the money out of the gates into the economy. In the end, they paid like 8 cents on the dollar back because of the inflation. So people really have to look into how this works. Governments can really take out big loans because inflation will make the loans shrink to 10%. So I don't think it's a problem. So I think he really did the right thing. Now, if you ask me about the next one, I really don't think I'm capable of having anything to say about that. I don't think they cannot be compared to Bernanke, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think anything good is going to come out of it.
Now, many Americans are still struggling to find a job. Where do you see the unemployment rate by the end of the year, and how valid of a metric is it, the unemployment rate, in assessing the overall health of the economy?
Well, I think that the problem is structural. As you know, first of all, there was a lot of outsourcing, and then there are a lot of jobs that don't need a lot of people anymore because of the internet and the IT and all the technology. So I think people have to think a little bit in a different way, and it's going to be very hard to get the unemployment down. In my cycles, for the moment, I don't see unemployment going much lower than it is right now.
And Mr. Nenner, last question for you. You touched on recession earlier in our interview. When will recession hit the U.S., and just how bad will it be? What's it going to look like?
I think it's going to be bad. I think that we didn't deleverage enough. And like I said, cycles go up, go down. It takes 3.5, 4, 5 years. But if you almost don't jump up, and then you're jumping down, then you jump down from a much lower level. So it's very scary because we didn't have a lot of growth. And when this economic expansion is over, which should be over just normally because every expansion takes just a certain number of years, we're going to be in trouble.
All right, Charles Nenner of the Charles Nenner Research Group. Thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching Money News.